My name is Gwen. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've lived there for 80 years.
Really? Wow.
And I came from Idaho, American Falls, a small town outside of Pocatello, about 15 miles, a farming community.
When you were 10?
No, I was about 6.
6.
We moved to Ogden first. And it was during the war and very hard to find a place to live. So I remember when we first moved to Ogden, we had to live in a motel for a while till we could get an apartment.
Now, when you say we, who's we?
I'm talking about my mom and me.
You and your mother? Okay.
We came first. My mom was the oldest daughter of 12 children. She did not have another sister for 7 years. So she had a lot of responsibility.
I guess.
A lot of it. And as I said yesterday, my grandma was a widow at 43 years old, 3-month-old baby. Her husband had died of cancer. And she had a farm to take care of, 10 kids at home. 2 of the boys were gone in the service. But not only her own 10, but me most of the time. And they provided for themselves. They had a dairy farm, they had an orchard, they had a big garden.
And this is back in Pocatello?
American Falls.
American Falls.
Yes,
Gotcha.
just outside. So we lived, my grandma had this ranch down there, and from what my mom told me, the Depression hit, and they had bought a different dairy ranch out across the Snake River. Well, when that all happened, my grandpa couldn't get any money out of me. She told me he had $1 silver, and he would not spend that because he never knew when he was going to get another one. So I have no idea how long that was, but I only remember my grandpa he died when I was 3. I remember mostly him lying in bed. He was sick, he had cancer. So anyway, Mom stayed there to help my grandma. My mom and dad were married young, too young, frankly. She was 18 and he was 20 maybe.
Yeah.
And they were from another farming family too. And she just said that I really didn't know my dad hardly at all.
Really?
Yeah, because she left him when I was 3.
Oh.
And she just said he wasn't reliable. He'd say he was going to go to town to get something, and she wouldn't see him for 2 or 3 days because he'd run into somebody there asking to do something, off they'd go. So anyway, it just kind of, but I never felt lonely because I had this big family. And my younger uncles and aunts, they weren't that much older, different than me. I had an uncle that was 3 years younger, and an uncle 6 months older than me, that we were like brother and sister, you know. The bottom line is that we took care of ourselves, and just a difference in families. My husband's family, his dad died when he was like 3 or 4 too. And of course they lived in Salt Lake. But when I first met him, he told me that his mother put him in an orphanage when he was 5 years old. And she never come to see him. She never brought him a gift, never saw him on his birthday, nothing. And he had 3 older brothers, but he said nobody helped out. And he said it was a Mormon orphanage in Centerville, Utah, which I didn't even know Mormons had an orphanage. But he stayed there. He said it's probably the best thing that ever happened to him because it taught him how to work. He said first day he was there, told him to go pull some weeds. He said he went and pulled weeds, told the guy, they had a manager, a farm couple, or a husband and wife and a couple of kids that managed this orphanage, I guess. And he said, told him he was done, and he went over and he says, no, you haven't done it, you haven't done it right. And he says, well, I pulled the weeds, and he says, no, you only pulled the top off the weeds. So he said, you have to get through it. But this difference in the story, because when he told me that, I thought about my own grandma and how she had taken care of her kid. She didn't farm him out to anybody. She didn't abandon them. She raised them, got them through high school and on their way in life. So, I mean, that's one thing I will say about my grandma and her siblings on both sides. Husband, you know, her husbands and her, they were always close and helped out.
Awesome.
And so
Hold
that
on.
was how great. Okay, so when I was 6 years old, we moved to American Falls to Ogden, Utah, which was a big railroad town there, and lots of servicemen. I remember this. I mean, they just filled the streets. They had an Air Force base, a Naval base, all kinds of stuff there. So anyway, we moved there, and my mom got a job in a club called the United Nations Club, waitressing. And they had bands, and they had all kind of entertainment and stuff, but my mom was a really good singer, so she sang with the band along with working.
Wow.
So,
Talented.
yeah, so we got this apartment on the same street where the club was, probably a quarter block away or something. And so she could just come down there and check on me, and then she had friends that lived in this apartment house too. Everybody was pretty chummy then because a lot of the men had gone off to the service, and the women were living there alone. And so I had a great childhood. That 25th Street in Ogden was supposed to be a very famous, awful street, like a thin street, you know, lots of clubs and stuff, but it was always servicemen. But you know, I never ever felt threatened, nobody ever bothered me, and we used to ride our bike up and down that street and roller skate. Anyway, so my mom and I were there till we were there, and then my two aunts just older than I, they graduated high school, so they came to Ogden to get a job too. So one worked at the Navy, the Hill Air Force Base, and the other one worked at a Navy base, probably doing secretarial work. And so they met both their husbands at a dance hall in Ogden.
In the dance hall.
Yes, they had big dances in those days. Everybody went dancing. And so my mom had gotten divorced. I never saw my dad. He never paid any child support, nothing. So she basically kind of supported us, and the four of us lived there together. And then as time went on, another year or so, my older uncle took over the ranch or farm for my grandma.
Huh.
So grandma moved to Ogden
Oh.
with the two younger boys. And she got a job at the hospital as a practical nurse. So then the two girls that first moved down, they moved down, got their own apartment, and so grandma and my two uncles and mom and I stayed in the place. So we had a good life, and my friend and I talked about it many times that we think we had the best of times during our lifetime. No crime, no all the stuff that's happening nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, we felt totally safe running up and down these busy streets filled with servicemen every day. Yeah, but we all liked our aunts dating these servicemen because they could get us treats from the PX, which we couldn't buy candy or gum or anything. And so when they'd come to pick up the girl, they'd bring us a case of candy bars or bubble gum or something. We thought that was pretty cool.
A real treat.
So anyway, as time went on, so we stayed there till I was in the 7th grade. And my mom had met a fellow and they got married. And he was also from Utah. But he was from a small town,
Yeah.
more southern Utah. So then Mom and I, and George was his name, we moved to Salt Lake.
Uh-huh.
And so I started junior high down there. And we stayed there, my mom and him, and the whole family kind of migrated, you know. First they went to Ogden, then they come to Salt Lake. It was just kind of the way it was.
Yeah.
And we all had a really tight family, close. And we'd still go up to Idaho on a holiday and stuff, you know, and see the uncles at the ranch and stuff like that. So I know my mom just said, growing up, she made bread every day of her life. 8 loaves of bread, she said.
8.
8 loaves, because they had all these boys, 7 boys, you know. So I can remember that my grandma'd make pies, cinnamon rolls, bread every day. I can remember coming home from school, would have hot bread with honey or jam or whatever, or she'd make fried bread, which we all loved that.
Yeah.
And I can remember people on the bus knew my grandma, because we took a school bus. People on the bus knew my grandma baked, and so some of those boys as friends wanted to come over, stop every night after school to have these treats. Anyway,
That's terrific.
my mom told me, she said to herself, when I leave home, I am never making another loaf of bread, never. And she never did. She never did. An hour, and in that 9 months of time, I had saved $200.
Wow.
I know. I think these kids nowadays can't even save $50, and I thought, and I was buying my own clothes and everything, but my family instilled a work ethic in me. I worked. I wanted to have a job. I wanted my own money.
Yeah. What kind of job?
This was like just in a 5 and dime, because I only worked in a half a day,
Uh-huh.
you know, after school. So I worked at that, and then after I graduated from high school, a lot of my friends were going to college and stuff, but they were looking for husbands. I wasn't really looking for a husband
Huh.
at that time. I just knew I wanted a job and have my own money. So I got a job right out of high school at the telephone company. And so I worked there, and I had been going to fellow while I was in high school. I'd met him, but he got drafted. So he went to the service, the Korean War. And so he was gone for 2 years. So then when he came back, we started dating again, and he wanted to get married, and I said, well, I think we need to wait a little while. You know, you've been gone, blah, blah. And so we waited a year.
Huh?
And then we got married. And of course, I thought I knew it all, like everybody does at that age. I thought I was growing up enough to be married, and I think I was growing up enough, but I don't think he was. Sorry.
What was his name?
His name was Willis. And so I married him, and we both worked and stuff, but he had come from a large family. He'd come from a family of 13. So I really liked his family. I liked them all, and they all liked me too. But we were married for 10 years, and I had Michelle.
Uh-huh.
But our marriage just wasn't going in the direction I felt like it was.
Uh-huh.
I didn't feel like he was ambitious enough or cared enough about certain things. And so I thought about it long and hard, and I just thought, I can probably stick this out till Michelle's 18. Well, during this time, I got pregnant, but I had problems. I had a tumor. So I had to have a hysterectomy, so I couldn't have any more children.
Oh,
I was 24.
wow.
Yeah, that was pretty devastating to me, and all of us, of course. But anyway, I thought I can stick this out till Michelle's 18 and then get divorced. And one day I just lay in bed that night, and I thought, I was 28, and I thought, at 28, I might be able to find someone else. But at 42, what are going to be my chances?
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to my husband about it, and he was totally indifferent. He said, okay. You know, I don't know if he didn't think I'd go through with it or what. But anyway, I did get divorced. And I met a fabulous person within a very few months. Someone introduced me, and he'd been divorced for 4 years. And he was the same way I was. He was a morning person. We both liked being up in the morning. He liked to have breakfast. I cooked breakfast every morning for my family. And
His name?
his name was John. And so Shelley was 4 when we got married to him, and he had 2 children. So I raised his boy. His boy stayed with us. His daughter wasn't old enough to choose.
Uh-huh.
So she stayed with her mother, but we had her every weekend. So it was like a little family unit. And we had a great marriage.
Terrific.
Everybody loved John. He just had that kind of personality.
Uh-huh.
And he laughed. I mean, his laughing to him was like breathing. I told him one sure the only man I ever knew laughed, and like you do, and he said, oh, everybody laughs. And I said, no, they don't. Men will laugh over a joke or some little thing, you know, but you laugh out loud. And so we were married like within a year. And so I had a house from my other husband, my ex-husband. So I told him he could have the house and all the furnishings at because John and I were going to build our own house. And that's what we did.
Uh-huh.
And so we built the house, and we let him have it. And I think back about it now, and I thought, he went off out of town to work in Alaska or somewhere. I said, why don't you rent this house where you're gone? Oh, I don't want to do that. He left it sitting vacant for almost 2 years and went to rack and ruin. I mean, I just gave it to him. He didn't give me any money for it or anything. And I just thought, that's kind of the way he was. He just, when he wanted something, all excited about it for maybe a week, and then the bloom wore off. That's what drove me crazy, because he never discussed it with me. Just go out and buy something. Like one time I come home, he bought a Jeep. I said, what are you doing with the Jeep? Well, I bought it for deer hunting. I should buy a Jeep for a week of deer hunting. What are you going to do with it the rest of the year? I mean, just stuff like that. Anyway, he wasn't a drinker or a womanizer or mean or any of those things. I told him, I just think you never grew up. And I used to tell him, I said, I think you wanted to marry your mother. I am not your mother, I'm your wife. You want me to do everything for you, and you have no responsibilities. That's not my idea of marriage.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
I know. And years later, we were always friends. We never said a bad word about one another. And because I don't believe in that. Just because I told my husband, the second husband, he had a few little things to say about his wife, and I just told him, I never want to hear you say one word about her, not one negative word, because that's the mother of your children, and if you say it in front of them, they're going to stick up for her, just like people do. They might agree with you, but they don't want to hear it.
Right. And
I said, just because you cannot live with someone should not make you enemies. And he listened to me, thank goodness.
It's good
and
policy.
She and I were friends. I mean, we had nothing against one another. And she had 2 young kids, and when our kids were like teenagers or stuff, we'd go pick up her kids because their father had passed away, and take them boating with her, water skiing and, camping and stuff, because they didn't have a dad.
Oh.
And so I always my family so embraced John, because he's this up personality. He loved to golf. He loved to dance. He loved to play cards. So that's what we did. We went on lots of family vacations. And the kids were young, Michelle was young, and she had cousins her age, and we always just had the best time. So every year we'd go to my aunt's, had a motel in St. George, Utah. So once from Utah, I'd meet down there, and once from California, I'd come up. We'd spend every Easter and Thanksgiving down there. So, we always stayed tight.
Awesome.
Okay, when Michelle was born, I knew that there was every possibility I wouldn't be having any more children. But my folks, they adored her, and so did I, and so did everybody. And she was the cutest baby. She had a whole head of hair when she was born. And most of my friends' kids had no hair at all. But she had hair like when she's like a year old down the hair, Anyway, she was a smart kid.
Yeah.
And I can remember, I think back at it now, I think, I can't believe I let her kind of be alone when she was in at kindergarten, because I worked.
Yeah.
And so I'd drop her off at school and then she'd walk home and let herself in the house. Back in those days, we never even locked our door
Uh-huh.
or even pulled down the garage.
What a blessing.
Yes, that's what I mean about the best of times. And so she'd come in the house and she'd call me, I'm home. And I'd say, well, turn on a cartoon, or I got some in the fridge, you can have a little bite to eat, and I'll be home usually in an hour, hour and a half, something like that.
Uh-huh.
But she was really responsible. And I'd tell her, because my stepson wasn't responsible. I mean, he'd read the paper, eat, and everything over the counter, and I'd say, when I get home, I don't expect to walk in the house and look at a messy counter. That counter is to be cleaned off when I get home. So she'd make sure the counter was cleaned up for me, you know. Because I said, that just puts me in a bad mood right when I walk in the door. But when she was probably 10 years old, I'd leave a recipe out for her and say, you know, maybe you can try to make this, or, you know, she could start things. And she was really good about it and stuff, and she was really a good kid, and we had a really great family life. And on Sunday night, we'd play games a lot, like Monopoly or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Or pinochle. We taught the kids pinochle.
Mm.
We'd play cards, and we'd, my husband and my uncle or their son or somebody else would always be over there on Sunday, and I'd fix dinner, and then we'd all have dinner, and then we'd go downstairs and play cards, or a game or something, you know, on Sunday night. But we went skiing, snow skiing,
Nice.
all of us, and we had a boat, and we'd go boating in the summer like every weekend. We all learned.
On Salt Lake?
No, you can't do that. No, freshwater,
Uh-huh.
in reservoirs and
Okay.
stuff. The Great Salt Lake you can boat on, but you couldn't water ski on.
Uh-huh.
I never seen anybody water ski. I don't know if it's the salt or what. Because they had sailboats out there,
Uh-huh.
but that's basically all I've seen. So anyway, we just had a regular boat, and we'd go down to Lake Powell, or we'd take the boat up to Bear Lake, a huge lake up on the northern end of the state. And we'd go camping with my aunt and uncle and their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And Shelley was really tight with him because that was like her idol. She was like 4 years older than Shelley. And she just thought she was wonderful. And she still thinks she was wonderful. She was down here this past weekend. So we did that, and we did a lot of things. And so this kind of thing, Shelley wanted to take dance lessons, you know. So I take her up to the University of Utah to a modern dance class. And so I took her in there, called Virginia Tanner's Dance Studio. So I took her in there, and I dropped her off, and the woman said, come back in about an hour. I get back, and she's crying. She's like 5 or 6 years old now. I said, why are you crying? I wanted to take a dance class. I said, well, you are. And she said, well, I want my tutu. Well, they just had to do a little leotard.
Yeah.
She said, that's not a dance outfit, and the bathing suit. So my mom was really involved in music. She could play the piano, the guitar, ukulele, anything. So she taught Shelley how to play the guitar. She had piano lessons, and Shelley sang with some of her group because my mom taught music and had a chorus, a professional chorus that would sing around the places. So anyway, she had Shelley do a lot of things like that because Shelley had a really good voice and could do that, and she enjoyed it and stuff. And she was like every teenager, you have your troubles for a few months. I told her that, and she thought she was going around with this girl who quit school, and I just said, you can't go around with her because all of a sudden I get a report card and she's missed all these classes, and I'm dropping her off at school every day. So boy, when she got home, we had a talk. I says, how come you're missing these classes? Well, her friend had a car and go and pick her up. They'd go off and have breakfast, and then she'd come back to school, which I had no idea. So I said, okay, I'm going to tell you what, you love skiing. I usually buy you a ski pass. I won't be buying you any ski pass unless you go to classes. And I'm going to have the school call me if you miss any classes. Well, she buckled down. The bottom line is, I told her, I said, you think this friend's so neat right now? But I said, in a year you won't be having anything to do with her. And she's, oh yes I will, Mom. That's my best friend. I says, no, because you're moving forward. And she stopped. She decides school is important. I said, school is a training ground for all of it. If you can't go to school with no responsibilities other than showing up, how do you think you're going to handle a job and responsibilities? I said, that's what you're there for. And so she buckled right down. By the time she was a senior in high school, she had enough credit. She only had to take one class, and she had a full-time job. So she was always a good student, and my husband was a salesman, a golf salesman, and so she learned a lot about sales and stuff. And when she was in high school, I used to have a girl I'd pick from high school that she would represent their high school at the stores, fashion shows and stuff like that. I can't remember what it was called something. And they'd have girls from each school. But so Shelley got, that was her title. I can't remember what it was called right now. But she got a job at Dillard's department store. And so she worked there, after school or on Saturday and stuff. And so I think they gave her good training because she went out, because she had to talk to people, about what she was doing. It was kind of like a business class or something like business
Practical.
sales. Yeah, business sales and stuff like that. When they were in high school, they had to save half the price, and then we'd pay the other half, and we'd pay their gas and insurance, as long as they were doing well in high school. Anyway, so John told them A's and B's, in college, and we'll pay your tuition. So Shelley went to the University of Utah, And the son went down to Southern Utah University because he got a scholarship to play basketball. So anyway, Shelley went and she worked part-time at a really nice restaurant that she made good tips at, like in the evening. So I have this motto in my life that when you make money, I told her this right off, when you got your first check, you never put your full check in the bank. You put a certain amount in savings. And you forget this money's over here. Because what you look at in your checkbook, that's the money you're going to live on. So even though you might have another $100 over here, that's for a rainy day. And she took that to heart. And she lived on her tips. And when she got a check, which back in those days, I think they were only paying you $3 an hour because you're making tips,
Right.
And so when she'd get her check, then she'd put that in savings. So she always did that, and I always had done that too. My whole life when I worked, I had a set amount going to savings. I never touched it, I didn't spend it. It was for emergencies. So anyway, she was really good, always about money, and knew how to manage money. So she went off to a couple of years of college, and then she didn't finish. Her girlfriend and her decided to move to California. So they moved down to California and stayed with my aunt for a little while, and then they got their own apartment.
In Southern California?
They lived in, I know the name of the town as well as anything, I can't think of it. 10 miles from Disneyland.
It'll come.
I can't think right now. They lived in touristy places down there. Anyway, so she stayed with her, but Shelley and her friend lived out in Balboa Island. I mean, I went down there to visit and I thought, boy, this is really nice. They were renting from a friend of her friend. Her friend that she went down there with, she knew this lady. I think this lady had dated her dad at some time, something like that. So they had a little leg in the door, and they were able to get a job and stuff. And they stayed probably for a year, maybe a year and a half. But it was fun to farm something different, away from home. And so she went down there, and she'd come back, and I'd go down, so we still saw one a lot.
And what were you doing? Well, this is going.
Okay, so when the kids were left home, I didn't really need to work, so I only worked a couple of days a week. So my husband and I like to play golf. We all like to play golf. So we would go, because he was a salesman, so I would go sometimes on the road with him, and then he'd work in the morning, and then we'd go golfing afterward or something, or we just have a long weekend. So he loved his job. He absolutely loved his job. He used to tell me all the time, I love my job. I said, yes, I can see, because you love golfing. You know all these golf pros. You love to approach them about what you're going to present to them and sell them. And he was a really good salesman, in fact, I could listen to him on the phone. Because new pros, salesmen go in and try to load them down with stuff, kind of. And he wasn't one to do that. And they'd call up and say, I want this, and he said, no, you don't want that many to begin with. You start with a dozen. And when you turn half that over, you order another. You don't want to be caught with a store load
Right.
and merchandise in the winter when you have no business. So anyway, we bought a condo in southern Utah. So we'd go down there and go golfing a lot. And we had a lot of friends that had the same thing, you know. So we had a really good life. We had a lot of friends that did the same thing we did, golfing and stuff. We'd go on little golf trips, and they'd play in golf tournaments, and we would go, the girls would go off on their own little golf thing too. So that was all great, but then my husband had a open heart surgery when he was 46. And he was a healthy guy. Nobody could believe that help happened to him, but the doctor said they thought he was born with a bad valve. And just as time went on, you know, it just got worse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Shelley was wonderful when he was in the hospital, even though she lived back in Tulsa then. She'd come out. They put him in a medically induced coma so he could heal easier for a month. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, she came out and stayed with me 2 or 3 weeks. And she was really, really great with my folks when they were sick. She'd come home, you know, really often. And because sometimes I just feel like I don't know if I can do all this. And she'd just say, I'll be out tomorrow, Mom. You know, she's always been a really caring person. And I think she got a lot of that from my mother, because my mom took care of so many people during my growing up years. A friend in need, somebody was sick, she'd have them come stay with us, kind of nurse them back. And I just think Michelle saw a lot of that, and so she's been very hands-on in her life, helping. And she's a good person, that's what I mean. And that's what I kind of think about myself, because I got married again, and my husband died. John died.
John died.
Yeah, he died here. They had just moved here, and it was Christmas time.
Wow.
And John says, I think we got to go back and spend Christmas with Shelley because she didn't have any family there. So my folks and he and I came here. And we pulled in the driveway. We got out of the car, my mom and I, to walk in the house. And the guy said, we'll bring the luggage and presents in. Well, all of a sudden the car drove away. We didn't know what was going on. And then they called about a half hour and said John had had a heart attack in the driveway and died. So that was a terrible thing for her, you know, at Christmas, and for all of us, of course. So we had his funeral the day after Christmas. I think back about it now. People flew in from so many places, we couldn't believe it, the day after Christmas. And the mortuary was clear full. The line was 2 blocks still outside when we had to close the doors. So he really had a really, really lot of group people, friends, and business acquaintances.
Yep.
He represented about 10 or 12 companies.
Wow.
And so, anyway, so we had a good we really had a good life, and it just was too short.
Mm.
We were married like 24 years.
Mm.
So,
But what makes you proud?
I am proud of my family and how helpful they are to everyone.
Mm.
And I'm proud of their honesty and caring. Because so many families don't have that. They don't have that.
That's right.
And I have these stepchildren. My stepdaughter's got 5 kids, and she's got a fabulous children, 3 boys and 2 girls. Very successful, all of them. And I tell her all the time, I've always maintained ties. I never let them out of my life. And I tell her all the time, your dad would be so proud of you and your children.
Mm.
Because her own business. And she's had that business almost 35 years in a small town like this.
Wow.
And it's been a successful business.
Mm.
And so that's something for me to be proud of.
Absolutely.
And her to be proud of too.
You bet.
And I've been to market with her lots of times. And people, that's hard work. It's not easy.
All right.
So I'm proud of her, I'm proud of our family, and I'm proud of the heritage that we have and what we've instilled in our posterity.
Yeah.
About how you do things, and you hang on to your family and you make them proud. That's the way I feel.